Kangaroos have been shot since we first arrived here in Australia. Always been shot and hunted, and it was originally, like initially, just the skins were sent overseas, so just exporting the skins for leather, because there was no way to get the meat over there safely anyway, and the colonials in England wouldn't eat kangaroo meat anyway. They wanted beef and mutton and their traditional meat. But then so kangaroos were shot for a very long time for pest control and for pet meat, and it was only within the last 15 years or 20 years, say, that they've been shot for human consumption in any quantity, and that's where it becomes really frightening, because once you start killing animals for a profit,
yes,
all the conservation criteria go out the window, and all you're interested in is the profit, and that's the industry and the people that are employed in the government that run these programs, that control these programs. They're only interested in their jobs, and that's how we've got to the state now where kangaroo populations have just crashed, and I really can't see them picking up to what they used to be.
Now, tell me what your what signs you're going by that the kangaroo populations have crashed.
We can only work on the government figures, the figures that the government produce, and we know that they're a bit shonky. Each year they change the methodology, they change the people, they change the correction factors, they change everything every year. They decide they'll improve on it, so the data that they collected from counting 10 years ago is totally irrelevant to what it is, to what's happening today.
Not comparable.
No, they can't compare it. It's still very, they try to, but it doesn't really stack up scientifically.
Give us some examples of how the collection methods and definitions have changed that you know of.
They fly over. They've started using helicopters in the last few years, but then they've decided that was too expensive, so they've gone back to aircraft, which is a totally different setup altogether. What they do, they fly in a straight line over a long section of country, and they have counters on each side of a person counting on each side of the aircraft, and they count kangaroos they can see, and then they dream up a correction factor which is supposed to represent whether it's open plains, tree country, night, early in the morning or later in the day or what. And they keep changing these correction factors all the time, and they multiply the number of kangaroos that they see with the correction factors, and then they say, okay, well, then they multiply by the area of that they're trying to count, the state or whatever, and then they come up with these grossly inflated figures. And we know that, but we've never, in spite of the fact that we've asked, and we've even asked in court, we have never received the details of how they count the kangaroos. They will not give them to us because they know that we can pull them apart. There's no other people counting, there's no independent counting being done, it's only being done by the government, and they're being funded by the industry and by the various state government conservation departments. We get better information from talking to people in rural areas.
Yes.
We know, for instance, that kangaroo shooters have come out in the press and said, well, we're giving the industry away because there's no more kangaroos left to shoot in certain areas. We know that in many areas, particularly in New South Wales, South Australia, and some areas of Western Australia, that kangaroos are regionally extinct. They're no longer in the areas that they were. Most of them are tucked up into little national parks.
That's certainly the case in Victoria, and I also know of wildlife ecologists who are counting scats and sightings and actually evaluating different local areas which were once 100% inhabited, and discovering, you know, there's only 20% inhabited now by kangaroos.
That's right. That's what's happening. When we find talking to local people when we go out west, trips out west is good too, because you can talk to people who aren't biased, people in service stations, people in cafes and so on. If you talk to some farmers, they'll say, oh yeah, there's millions of kangaroos out there, heaps and heaps of them. Talk to other farmers. One lady I spoke to recently in Western New South Wales said she was farming 6,000 hectares, and she said she'd only seen 4 kangaroos on a property recently, and they were around one of her dams. And she said they were only small, and she said she hadn't seen a big kangaroo on her place for a long, long time.